When we have other humans in our midst, communication becomes pivotal. Even though we are doing this for mastering the self, we also understand that in order to master ourselves, we have to also do it alongside other humans. And when we have other humans in our midst, we need to remember that communication becomes one of those things that is pivotal. It is important for us to get our message across. It is important for us to foster better relationships. It's important for us to resolve conflict. It just makes life, right? So today I wanted to talk about some pitfalls that we may find when we are having long-term relationships where we need to be communicating more effectively. I'm going to mention 5 and I'll just touch on each one a little bit and then open for conversation, and you can share your thoughts on the pitfalls. So the first thing that we need to achieve is to listen. However, we need to ensure that our listening is active, right? Sometimes we tend to listen to answer or to respond, and therefore we are not necessarily actively listening. So we need to be aware not to get so stuck in the response that we are already thinking. As this person is talking, we're already thinking, okay, what's going to be my answer? What's going to be my answer? And then when you have formulated the perfect answer, that's when you just barge in and then you interrupt. But when you are intentionally actively listening, you will allow yourself to hear what this person is saying, and then you can avoid interrupting the other person. I know sometimes when we are talking with people that we are having some difficult relationships with, when we feel like maybe not heard in those conversations or in those discussions, and sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to speak my mind as soon as possible, otherwise I lose out on this. This is when the active listening seems to, elude us a little bit. Let me know what you think this lack of active listening is contributing to ineffective communication, and if you've ever experienced that, right? I know that I've experienced interrupting. Right, I would interrupt. This particular person that I was talking to had a habit of me losing them in the conversation as I'm trying to state my case. Then they're gone. They're no longer interested. So I needed to find a way of getting my message across quick enough and punchy enough in order to get to the other side of that conversation. And that is not the makings of effective communication. When you have to rush through it, trust me, it's not. Yes, you may get your words, your message across, but trust me, that is not effective communication, and that is one thing that we need to look into, right? So the next thing that I want to touch on is assuming understanding. When we assume that what this person is saying, we get it, right? Sometimes we tend to do that maybe because of familiarity in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, we do that because we maybe don't really want to know what this person means, or we are too familiar and we think we can actually get to define what they mean. And again, this is a pitfall to avoid because it just leads to more and more miscommunication. It leads to the breakdown in the communication, and what we have to do is to sometimes ask clarifying questions, right? Challenges with our communication that stems from our formative years, where maybe asking a follow-up question was never welcomed. This can be a bit of a problem where you try so hard to be assuming of what this person is saying and assuming the understanding. So that is something to unlearn and to rather especially in important, in fact, not especially, in every communication, we need to ensure that we hear what the other person is saying. And of course, there are terrible situations where people can gaslight you, but that's not what we are talking about today. One day we will talk about that. But right now, we're talking about when we are talking with people that we want and we both want to be building onto these communication issues and building effectiveness in our communication. And we all are on the same page and we have the same goal. Excuse me. Sorry. And we both want the same thing in terms of getting to resolve whatever is either the conflict or getting our message across. We want to be asking clarifying questions and also paraphrasing to hear that we are on the same page. Right. And then the next one is overcomplicating communication. I think there's a saying in the Bible where it says that you need to speak to people in the language that they can hear you. It does not make sense for me to go to a place, let's say I go to a place, I start speaking in my language and then the people can't hear me. Yes, you can say all you want, but if they're not hearing you, then you're not communicating. So sometimes in our communication, we can get tied into overcomplicating our communication. We use big words, we use jargon, we use too many words sometimes, and that can confuse our audience. So what we want to do is to keep our communication clear and concise, so that by the time you finish saying a sentence, you can also hear what you just said, right? And when these are important conversations, maybe taking some time out to actually craft your message can be beneficial to you. The next one that I want to touch on is when we neglect nonverbal communication. Now, with communication, we all know, we were taught in primary school that communication is not just the words that we use. We also have body cues, right? Non-verbal cues, where the way in which a person is standing. Of course, we were taught about how, if somebody is standing crossing their arms in front of you, that means they are blocking you off. And yes, all of those things are very general and that can work and you can understand who you're talking to in that regard. However, it is important to also understand who you are talking to. So when we know the people that we are talking to, there are certain non-verbal cues that maybe in that particular relationship has been built, and now we start to see certain things and we now need to take note of those. When we see that maybe somebody is starting to get agitated, or maybe they are struggling to express themselves, and then we keep going, and then maybe their tone of voice is going up. So all of those non-verbal cues, we need to be aware of them so that we are able to convey our message in the right space and in a way that all of these things that contribute to effective communication, your non-verbal cues, the tone of voice, your stance and your sitting there, all of that contributes, and we can now convey our message to the person in an intended way. And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on was difficult conversations, or rather avoiding them. Now, with communication, we all want to be all on the same beautiful space, everything is all sunny, like everything is just gelling. However, in relationships with anybody, there will come a time when we have to have difficult conversations. Sometimes people say, I don't want to dampen the mood, so I don't want to raise this difficult thing that I want us to discuss, especially in romantic relationships. And I always ask when people say that, when you do that, what is the reason for that? And then the answer would usually be, I'm avoiding the conflict that may come from this. And I always say, when you avoid the conflict that can come from addressing something that needs to be addressed, notice how you are creating or starting the conflict within yourself. Because the truth of the matter is that when you stop yourself from talking about this, especially when it's important to you, it does not usually mean that it leaves your mind as well. It means that there's a lot of thinking that is happening, that you are trying to fix something that maybe you are unable to fix because it's not yours to fix. However, when you have communicated with the person who needs to be involved in this conversation, then you can get to clarity. You can get to the clarity of, yes, it can be fixed, no, it can be fixed. Do I let it go? Do I pursue it? So all of that becomes available to you. But when you are avoiding having difficult conversations, you are not helping anybody. It does not go away. Right? You may hope that one day it will just disappear. It does not, unfortunately. So at some point, you're going to need to sit down and have these conversations so that they can get resolved. Yes, you may not be ready right now as this thing comes up. You may need to wrap your head around it, all of that. But that also means you just need to take your time and then craft your message, because now when you are able to craft your message in a way that you want to deliver it, you are allowing yourself to also process how important this thing is and what the message is that you want to relay to the other person. I'm just going to end there with those 5 points, but we need to take note of these pitfalls in order for us to improve on our communication. And I hope that this was very helpful. And that you will share with us what your thoughts are in terms of your communication. Do you need help with your communication? Maybe establishing what your communication style needs to be, because a lot of the times we communicate based on how we were brought up. So our environment kind of formulated how we communicate, and then some things don't work because we are meeting other people who are not us. So we also need to take all of that into consideration. So I hope this was helpful. I would love to hear how you handle your communication. Any of those 5 pitfalls that I mentioned that you've thought of, or you've fallen into them and you fixed them, or you need help with, let us know, and we will see you again on Sunday. Keep going. You are on day 17 of this challenge, and I think you are doing brilliantly if you're still carrying on. Remember to also get the PDF of the first 7 days by clicking on the link so that you are able to directly request for that. And that is it from me. Good night and keep warm. Mwah. Bye-bye.